All righty. I want to thank everyone for being here and welcome you to the PAR Perspective. This is going to be our monthly webinar on topics that are of importance to the state of Louisiana, and particularly to hear feedback from both from y'all, and you can get feedback from us. I am Stephen Procopio. I'm the president of the Public Affairs Research Council of Louisiana. That is an over 70-year-old organization that's been around since the time of Earl Long. We are focusing on redistricting. On this topic, it's something we've done in the past, but we also cover fiscal issues. We particularly focus on good governance, transparency, and accountability. Also want to point out, you can't see her, but she's behind the PAR sign there is Kaylee Desatel, our communications manager. She's there to keep us running smoothly. And if it doesn't run smoothly, it's probably my fault, not hers. So just clarify that up front. And also we have Melinda DeLotte. That's PAR's research director. She's been on the job like a month at this point. She's going to use her over 20 years in experience as a reporter to make sure we have a robust discussion. She will be guiding our question and answer section. If you remember, this is recorded and we will put this on YouTube. If you have any questions at any point, I'll put them either in the question and answer section, or you do like I do whenever I'm on a webinar, just put it in the chat and totally disregard that. So we'll understand if you do that as well. We will be having our panelists. We will have Sharon Hewitt. She should be along shortly. Yeah, obviously they're all in the middle of the session. Unfortunately, House Chair John Stefanski can't make it as his committee is currently hearing redistricting bills. He is the chair of the House and Governmental Affairs. The Governmental Affairs Committees are the ones responsible for looking at redistricting, so they are the stars of the show. He is actually doing Bessie, a congressional district, and PSC right now, even as we speak, and it doesn't look like he's going to get out of that committee anytime soon. The Government Affairs Committee, Sharon Hewitt, is a little bit further along, but she's also just wrapped up committee, and plus they also have Senate floor action. So we're going to go ahead and Melinda, if I kick it over to you, can you set some stage for discussion for us, and what are the issues going on?
Sure. So right now, as most of you know, since you've actually expressed interest in redistricting, the legislature's in the middle of a 3-week special session on redistricting. And of course, they're in session to redraw the lines for the congressional districts, the state house districts, the state senate districts, the Bessie districts, and the Public Service Commission districts, and possibly the Supreme Court districts, though it's unclear if they'll actually move ahead with that. This morning, we saw the first bills actually starting to get out of committee. Senator Hewitt's Senate and Governmental Affairs Committee voted 2 bills out of committee this morning. One is a congressional map bill that Senator Hewitt is sponsoring, and the other is a state Senate district map bill that Senate President Paige Cortez is sponsoring. And so those 2 bills are the first ones to get out of committee, and they will be debated on the Senate floor on Tuesday. Meanwhile, the House and Governmental Affairs Committee is meeting right now and is considering its first bills of the session. And up right now is one that would redesign the congressional district maps. And of course, the underlying question in all of these debates is usually about whether or not to add additional majority minority seats. And I see we have Senator Hewitt on.
Senator Hewitt, thank you for coming. I know you're very busy right now. You're one of the 2, stars running the show of this whole special session. We know you're very busy. You had meetings this morning. You're a little bit further along, like I say, on your homework than the House is. So I'm glad you're able to join us. But we know you also at 1 o'clock you have a voting commission meeting as well. So we know we want to be respectful of your time. So with that, you want to give us any opening words before we start drilling you with a whole bunch of questions?
Well, sure. Yeah, I'll say a few things. What we have attempted to do is to conduct a very open and public and transparent process through all of this. Redistricting is a huge deal. It happens, every 10 years. And we have traveled the state, our joint committees, in soliciting input. We've adopted a set of redistricting principles. Of course, we have to follow federal and state law. And so we're working very hard to build a set of maps that does just that. And there are an infinite number of ways to accomplish that. And so everyone has lots of ideas and opinions on how to best do it. And so that's part of the legislative process and the sausage making, as they like to say. We all come together with different ideas. And, so I think it's been a good process so far. I hope that you all feel that way. I feel pretty good about the opportunities that the public has had and that elected officials have had, members of the community, so that we understand communities of interest. I think we've done a pretty good job of trying to make sure that we knew what those things are. And of course, the lawyers have been helping us understand the Voting Rights Act and making sure that we navigate that correctly. To not only be able to pass the legislature and of course be signed and enacted, but we want them to pass legal muster as well.
Senator, you have at least successfully gotten some bills out of committee, so that's you're doing better than the House side at this point. But I guess if we could start, and anybody who wants to send in questions, feel free to send them in the Q&A or the chat, and I'll be monitoring those. But Senator, if we could start with sort of what are your guiding principles for drawing new maps? Is it about protecting incumbents? Is it about making sure you maintain the same number of majority minority districts as currently exist? Is it about increasing that minority majority representation? So sort of talk us through sort of how the Senate is approaching it from the guiding principles aspect.
Yeah, well, we adopted a joint rule that guides the entire legislature. In the last session, we adopted a joint rule. So our redistricting principles are the same, both in the House and the Senate, as you would expect. The first is to follow all the federal and state laws. So that, includes the Voting Rights Act and the Equal Protection Clause, most notably. We know there are laws, federal laws, of course, governing the definition of equal population. So what are the rules around balancing the population between districts? It's plus or minus 5% on the legislative districts, Bessie and the Public Service Commission. It is as close to zero as practicable on the congressional maps. That's a kind of a legal term. And then we also have the Supreme Court in the call to redistrict. They are not bound by population numbers, but we recognize that they have not been redistricted in 30 years. And so the districts are very different in terms of population. And so there is an interest in looking at that from a population standpoint, even though the law does not require it. Then there are, they call them traditional redistricting principles. Things like keeping parishes together where you are able to, not splitting parishes, not splitting precincts, keeping communities of interest together, which, that's kind of a loose term, but people that live in an area know who their community of interest is. We had people on the road show say, the people on the other side of the bayou are in a different district, but we're all the same family, we're all the same community of interest, and we want to be in the same district. And so we got a lot of that information. So communities of interest are definitely a part of it, as well as, beginning with the core of previous districts. So that basically says we're going to start with the maps as they are currently configured, as opposed to starting with a clean sheet of paper, right? So you start with the core districts. The idea behind that is it gives you continuity of representation. So the idea is that the people that know if an elected official is doing a good job or a bad job are the people that currently are in that district. So you can vote that elected official in, you can vote that elected official out. You're in the best position. Let's not totally reconfigure the district so it's a whole new set of voters that don't know that elected official yet. Because that, again, that's just a breakdown in continuity representation. So, those are some of the basic principles that we have been working under. And they're not ordered in any particular order. So there's not like a pecking order or prioritization of them. In some cases, they compete because it's difficult to do everything. We want districts to be compact, right? And so, it's difficult to do all of those things. And so it's a little bit of a balancing act, and how people approach that could be very different.
And let me just ask, because you got some bills out of committee this morning on, every vote was 6-3 on all of those bills, and whether they were deferred or whether they were passed. And so I guess I'm wondering, because those votes broke down along, I mean, it was essentially white Republicans who voted to move bills out of committee that kept the status quo in terms of majority minority representation, and Black Democrats voted against those bills. And the reverse is that the white Republicans on the committee obviously voted to defer bills that expanded majority minority representation on the congressional side of things. So I guess I'm wondering, there's obviously a lot of discussion about this is going to go to court. People expect to see lawsuits out of this. Are you concerned about the breakdown of how those committee votes went today?
Well, I don't know that I would say that I am concerned. I think, based on what's been happening in states all around the country, we know there's a ton of litigation happening all around. Many states are ahead of us in their process of redistricting. And so lawsuits are being filed. That's why we're working very hard, not just to pass bills, but to pass bills that we can defend in court. And so we are passing bills that we believe, at least I can speak for my vote, I'm going to support bills that I believe we can defend in court. And so, there's has been a lot of discussion in our committee about, minority districts and the Voting Rights Act. And, there's some qualifiers in that area where we talk about, to be able to draw a minority district, you have to have a population that is large enough and compact enough where you can draw a district that gives the minority population an equal opportunity to select a member of their choice, to elect a candidate of their choice. So those are all words that could be argued in a court of law, right? What is an equal opportunity? And there's some very smart people that have modeled data to sort of guide that. And, so the difference of opinion is, you technically by law, a minority district is one that is 50% plus one minority. But I don't think there's anybody in the building that would necessarily believe that a minority district like that there's a very high probability that the minority would elect a candidate of their choice with only 50% plus one minority voters in a district. Things like voter turnout matter a lot, and our voter turnout is very different in different parts of the state. It's different depending on the election. It's different for Black voters than white voters and other minorities. And so all of those are factors in being able to predict whether the minority really truly does have an opportunity to elect a candidate of their choice. To me, in my opinion, is the worst thing that we could do is to try to create districts that are kind of minority, and by definition, because they're over 50%, but we aren't really giving them a real opportunity to elect a candidate of their choice. That would be disingenuous, and that would be a violation of the Voting Rights Act if we did that. And so that's kind of the differences of opinion. How many Black voters or minority voters do you need to have in a district, given where the district is, that give the minorities truly an opportunity to elect a candidate of their choice? And, we're all working very hard in the same direction to try to figure that out. But it's not a cookie cutter answer, and I'm sure that will be debated quite a bit in the legal proceedings going forward.
Well, and one of the questions we got from the attendees is asking if the Senate's hired an expert to conduct a racially polarized voting analysis on the congressional map. I know that's come up. So has the Senate hired anybody to do that?
We're working with a law firm that has, contracted with someone that can do that. These folks are in high demand because we're doing this in states all around the country. And so, we are waiting on the analysis. It's been some time now, and we are waiting for that. So we'll have a little bit better feel for that. We don't have it yet. Been getting some preliminary information and have, a little bit of a basis to guide kind of where we are today, but I don't have a full readout on that yet.
Do you have any idea when that'll show up?
I'm hoping to get a little bit more information this afternoon. I don't know exactly how long it's going to be before I get the final report.
Okay. And one of our attendees is asking if what you're seeing in the other states who are further ahead in their redistricting process, if that is serving as any sort of indication of how you think it could play out here. I think people are probably interested in what's going on in Alabama with its congressional map and the fact that a federal court has thrown out a map that only had one majority minority district out of 7 in Alabama. But so what are other states that are further ahead than us? How is that informing what's happening in Louisiana?
Yeah, well, certainly the lawyers are all paying attention. And of course, it's not just even the lawsuits that are happening right now, but lawsuits that have been happening over the last 10 years. You know, in the last couple of years, they've finally litigated and resolved lawsuits that were filed after the 2010 census. So some of these things took 8 years to resolve. And, you know, we hope that that's not going to be the case in Louisiana, but in the legal system, I guess anything's possible. So, you know, again, we're working very hard to understand the legal landscape, the interpretation of the laws. Every state is different, and where your population lives matters. So, you know, for example, one of the things that I hope we have debunked a little bit through some of these hearings is what has been said quite often on the roadshow, that, you know, 1/3 of our population is Black, therefore, you know, 2 out of 6 congressional seats ought to be held by a minority. Okay, specifically, the Voting Rights Act specifically, and I quoted this in committee several times, says that the minority population does not have a right to be represented in elected office in the same proportion as their population. Now, that's not how I just said it now is not exactly a quote, but it's pretty close. So it specifically says that in the Voting Rights Act in Section B, that just because you have 1/3 of your population Black, it does not mean that 1/3 of your congressional districts or Senate districts or, you know, pick whatever, need to be held by the minority. It doesn't say that, because it matters where people live. So to take it to the extreme, if you took 1/3, if you took all of the Black voters in the state and you dispersed them around the state in a perfectly homogeneous manner, and you drew districts, there wouldn't be a single minority district, right? So it matters where people live, and they have to live together in sufficient populations where you can draw a compact enough district to give them an opportunity to elect a candidate of their choice. So it's not a simple math problem, and it does matter where they live. And so again, I don't know where the population, the minority population lived in the state of Alabama, and, you know, how much credence to put in to that case where they have, you know, ruled that they needed to go back and draw another minority district. Now, I haven't really gotten involved in all of the analysis of their demographics in Alabama. But we know, and it's a different court system than probably where our, you know, cases could end up in Louisiana. But, you know, all of that is interesting information. The lawyers are all studying everything that's happening in all of the states around the country, and using that to guide and advise us as we go forward.
So I want to just jump in and just follow up real quickly. So they don't necessarily have a right to a proportional representation in terms of minority representation, but there is 2/3 of the population. There have been other maps that have 2 minority districts. And so what, broadly speaking, would be the reason why you wouldn't want to adopt that? What are your criticisms of that map as opposed to yours? So what is it not compact, or you worry about losing both districts and having none? Or what is the thesis of the argument? Not a legal one, but generally why you would prefer your map to those?
Yeah, because as you said, the way you create a second minority congressional district is by taking some of the minority out of the existing congressional district. And so by doing so, what you do is you take a district that right now is at 56% Black voting age population, and you create 2 districts that are at 51 or 52% Black voting age population. So you do stand a risk that those 2 new districts would not perform as a minority district. And you could very likely end up not having minority representation in both of those districts. And I think if the legislature were to do that, that there is not enough certainty around that enough certainty to say the minority population in a 52% Black voting age population district has an equal opportunity to elect a candidate of their choice. Because again, things like turnout and other factors matter. And, I think we could end up in a lawsuit again if we did that. You could end up in a lawsuit with another Voting Rights Act Section 2 violation because you took a functioning congressional district that functions and performs as a minority district and create two that don't. And so that's kind of the issue, then the balancing act that I'm trying to balance. And the reason why I believe that we can work, why the one district works. I've not seen any evidence that the two districts at a lower voting age population would perform.
Senator, we've gotten a couple questions about whether or not you anticipate that your committee is going to debate a new map for the Supreme Court, and if you think something might actually pass in this session.
I do think we will hear the Supreme Court bills sometime next week. It is a higher bar to pass a bill to redistrict the Supreme Court. It requires a 2/3 vote to pass a bill. All of the other bills require a majority vote. And so it's a higher bar. So, of course, the expectation is it's a little bit more challenging, not that the maps we have right now have been easy. But I think it's a conversation that's worth having. And there have been some good policy groups that have done work to evaluate our court system in Louisiana and how it compares to court systems in other states, looking at metrics like, judges per capita or judges per case, things like that. And what we have learned through that at all levels of our court system is that we have more judges than everybody else. And what we have done over the history of our state is, as the population has shifted and there was a need to create a new judicial district somewhere, we did, and it probably was very justified, but we never went back and eliminated ever in the history of the state, a judicial district where they had lost population. And so over the years, we have gotten to where we're not very efficient. And of course, these are all taxpayer dollars that are funding all of these offices. And so I think there's been a great case for action made in re-looking at the judicial system to make it more efficient, a little more balanced, and more competitive, compared to what our other states are doing. We're going to start with the Supreme Court. There are 7 members of the Supreme Court. Again, we're not required to balance based on population, but we have one district, for example, with 400,000 members, citizens. We have other districts with 800,000 citizens in round numbers. So if I live in a district with 400,000 and you live, Melinda, in a district with 800,000, my influence and my vote counts twice as much as yours does.
Right.
And so that's kind of the argument for why we should look at it. And so that's what we're going to do. I do have a bill that's been proposed. I think there are some other bills that have been authored. Mine is largely based on population, and my map works to make districts that are plus or minus 5% in population. Again, not that that's required by law, but I think it just makes sense to look at it as we are all the other maps.
And PAR has recommended that we believe y'all should try to actually redraw the Supreme Court maps for one of the reasons you just outlined. So
yeah, it's been a minute since that's been done.
25 years.
Yeah.
So we've got a lot of questions coming in. One person asked about compact districts and what are the advantages versus disadvantages of looking at compactness as the primary factor.
Yeah, districts that aren't compact, so picture something with lots of tentacles and spider webs like an octopus or something. It looks very gerrymandered. And so, most likely districts that are drawn that way is because you are looking, let's say, to cobble together enough Black precincts to create a minority district. Most of the ones that look a little bit weird are generally in support of a minority district. So there's a thing called the Equal Protection Clause, and it specifically says you cannot use race as a primary factor for drawing your districts. So on the one hand, you're not allowed to use race. On the other hand, there's the Voting Rights Act, Section 2, that, you know, and I can't quote that exactly, but basically it's saying you cannot dilute minorities where they don't have an opportunity to have a seat at the table and participate, you know, in the election process. And so, you know, you're trying to balance both of those things. So compactness is an attempt to try to provide some statistical analysis to say that, you know, you weren't gerrymandering districts by creating really bizarre looking things to that were driven by race as the primary reason for drawing a district. And so it is a balancing act, right? You want to, you know, you want to honor the Voting Rights Act, of course, and preserve minority districts, and for that to make sense with the population that you have. So anyhow, so compactness is one of the reasons why you look at that, is to try to evaluate or to flag potential gerrymandering. It also, just from a logistical standpoint, it makes sense, right? If you're an elected official in one of those districts, you'd certainly rather your district be fairly compact than geographically spread out, you know, all across the state. So, you know, do we still have issues with districts that look kind of weird to the naked eye? Of course we do. And there, you know, again, a variety of reasons for that. Competing interest in some cases in terms of redistricting principles. Maybe you're trying to preserve communities of interest. You know, maybe you're honoring the geography, the natural geography of the state, which is also a principle, like the Mississippi River. A lot of our districts along the river, they follow the river, and so they're long and skinny as opposed to more compact, because maybe you have one side of the river and another district is on the other side. And so there's a variety of competing reasons why you might do that. And so compactness is talked about. We haven't really used it as a statistical way of saying, well, because this number is lower than that number, then that makes this map better than that map, because it's not just looking at one thing.
Okay, thank you. And obviously, we have a question about, I'm assuming this is about the congressional districts, but obviously there's a discussion about fairness in the minority population. And you talked about this, about the concept of should you add another majority minority district because of the sheer number of Black people who live in the state. Somebody is asking, how can you address what this person considers the misperception of unfairness in the public arena? Is there a way to combat that narrative? And I guess I'd also add, do you just assume that the debate over Congress is eventually going to court?
Well, yeah, again, yeah, I'm assuming everything goes to court. You know, we're a very litigious state, so I can't imagine, you know, lots of this is not going to be taken to court. You know, the issue of fairness, you know, first of all, there's not a legal definition of that. So you won't find the word fair in the Voting Rights Act or the Equal Protection Clause or the redistricting principles. I mean, the word fair doesn't appear anywhere. And so I'm not trying to imply that it would be my intention to draw something that was viewed as unfair. I'm only saying, I don't know what the definition of fair is. And so, you know, if you're talking about the 1/3 translates into a right to have 2 out of 6, and for some people that feels fair, you know, I would say the law specifically says that that right doesn't exist, you know, but I believe, and I think our legislature does believe in the importance of the Voting Rights Act and minorities having a seat at the table and being represented. And so, you know, it's always just a matter of trying to figure out how to do it. The devil's always in the details. You know, I believe our conversations are richer. You know, believe in diversity. We're all a product of our own backgrounds, and you bring a lot of different perspectives. When you bring different perspectives together, I think it's a much better decision-making process and a more collaborative process. And so, you know, I support that. it's just, again, it's trying to figure out how to balance all of the issues that have to guide, how we draw the maps. And so we're committed to doing that, and we're committed to doing the very best job we can.
Well, and we have one question that I feel like comes up every redistricting cycle, which is, given the polarization and contentiousness of this redistricting session, do you believe the legislature would ever consider an independent commission to draw the maps? And do you
Let me be clear, that wasn't me on a different line. That's someone else that was one of our participants.
It is somebody who's watching. It's not Stephen. But yeah, would you be interested in do you think the legislature would consider an independent commission, and do you think that would have any value for the process?
Yeah, I'm really not a supporter of the idea of an independent commission. You're not going to take the politics out of anything. It really doesn't matter who pick a number, 8, 10, 12, 20 people are who are sitting on the commission. There will be politics involved in how they get selected, right? And then, there will be, people trying to influence the process. And so I don't really, and those are not elected of people that are held accountable to the voters. So I think you're much better off having the redistricting done by people who are elected officials, and we're all held accountable for everything that we do, whether it's redistricting or any of the other legislation that we pass. And I think that is a much better and a much more fair process.
And we have a question about when you were talking about gerrymandering. Someone asked, aren't the current districts gerrymandered in favor of the white population in the way they're currently drawn? I'm assuming this is about the congressional map, since that seems to be what most people are interested in.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how to respond to that exactly. And I'm really not trying to duck the question, but I just don't. I don't see that. I don't understand that. It is weird. I mean, I will acknowledge, like, sometimes we talk about, congressional district 5, being L-shaped. Let's take that as an example. So maybe somebody would say, well, that's not compact, or maybe it looks gerrymandered. Our state is L-shaped. So we start out, with a challenging state to begin with. I wish sometimes we had a very square or rectangular state like some of the other states. It might be easier to draw districts. But, the compelling state interest in drawing Congressional District 5, for example, it is the heart and soul of our agriculture and the rural parts of our state. And although they may seem like they're far apart geographically, but some of the issues in the northern part of the Florida parishes are no different than those in Northeast Louisiana, because it's all agricultural related. And so again, they're competing principles, redistricting principles, for all of these maps. And, we have to figure out the best way to balance those.
And on the subject of the congressional maps again, and the 5th district, we have someone who's asking about the shrinking population in North Louisiana and whether it makes sense to maintain 2 North Louisiana-based congressional districts, since more of the population is shifting south. So I guess the question would be, was there a consideration to perhaps redesigning it and not maintaining those 2 North Louisiana districts based on how the population has shifted?
Yeah, we looked at that, and it really was not that difficult. Both District 4 and District 5 in round numbers were 40,000 people short, each of them, maybe 47 and 37, something like that. It really was not very difficult to add a parish or 2 to District 4, from District 5, and then District 5 picked up a couple of parishes kind of in the Point Capay area, and then picked up more, where some parishes were split in the Florida parishes, we were able to put those parishes back together. So in a lot of ways, I think we have split fewer parishes in Senate Bill 5 than our current map. We have 0 precincts split, 0. You're not going to see that very often when you have to have congressional districts that are as close to 0 deviation as possible. Right? I mean, the only way generally you can accomplish that is by splitting precincts when you're trying to get down to double-digit differences in population. And so, what you lose, what you would give up by having, let's say, just one northern district. For example, District 4 is very proud of having both Barksdale and Fort Polk in their district, and there's tremendous synergies in having both of them, those major military installations represented in the same district. And, by doing a North District, you would split that up. So there's a number of other, kind of compelling state interests that led us to the map that we have now.
Okay. Let me, if I can, there's a really good question in the chat that I want to see. It's a tough one. If the Black legislators are okay with the 2nd district, and assume congressional district being less assured as a minority district, why would you take that into account? Essentially, if the people that represent African Americans in the state are like, we're willing to take the chance on a 2nd district, possibly diluting the vote, why not defer to them on that issue?
Well, I think it'd be interesting to ask Congressman Carter how he feels about that. I mean, he may not completely agree with that. And it's interesting too. I mean, look, there aren't too many Senate districts that are drawn with 51 or 52% Black voting age population. And in my conversations with many of the senators, they would be very uncomfortable with numbers that low that represent a minority district, and believing that, they had a, fair opportunity to get reelected. So I'm not sure why it would make sense to put that in a congressional district when you're not really willing to live with that in a Senate district. So the Senate numbers are going to be, much higher than that. And why is that? It's because I think the voter turnout and the numbers ultimately, when we get the polarized voting analysis, are going to show that to have, an equal opportunity to elect a candidate of your choice, those Black voting age population numbers are going to have to be higher than 51 or 52%. So
can I ask, I'm sorry to jump in and interrupt, but has Congressman Carter actually expressed that he wants his district to maintain a certain percentage voting age population that is Black? Has he given sort of a benchmark of what he wants?
I have not spoken to Congressman Carter, so I can't really answer that question yet, but I'm sure that he's watching, all of the proceedings at the legislature and is concerned. We would be, we know that that district has changed over the last 10 years. It was drawn as a 58% Black voting age population district. Today, with the current boundaries, it's at 56%. Of course, he just got elected in the district that is largely configured the same as it is in Senate Bill 5. He only needed, his population numbers were only off by 1,000 people. So there were very few changes made to his district, or the district that he represents.
And Senate Bill 5 is your map, just to clarify for those participants. That's the map that you passed. Okay.
Yeah, Senate Bill 5 map that we passed out of committee today. So, so the minority voters have had an opportunity to elect a congressman, a minority congressman, for many years now. Today, that district sits at 56%. Would they still be able to elect a candidate of their choice at 51 or 52? Not sure. And I do believe, again, to go back and answer your question, if African-American legislators are supportive of two districts that are 51, 52, why wouldn't we do that? Because I think that we would be subject to litigation in violation of the Voting Rights Act.
Okay.
Because we would have created two districts that are not performing under the Section 2, as opposed to having one district that we know performs because it has been regularly performing over the years.
Have you gotten any guardrails or guidance from the governor about what he would like to see on the congressional map? Have there been conversations happening there?
I have not talked to him directly about this personally. I have read some of his comments in the press, and he has said things like, I would be interested in having, a second majority minority district if it's possible. And so I believe that he recognizes, as we all do, that you have to follow the numbers. And it matters where people live in terms of your ability to create a district or not create another district.
Okay. One other quick question, and then I suspect you're going to have to jump off with us. We have a question about whether or not you would support a second majority Black district on the Supreme Court.
Yeah, for all the same reasons that we have been talking about, the map that I have proposed, I do have a Supreme Court map bill, does not add a second minority district for all the same reasons. I mean, the current minority district is by Justice Piper, not Piper, sorry, it's her first name. The district in New Orleans is currently drawn with 400,000 people in it. Right. To balance by population, it is the smallest district, and that is our one minority district currently. So to draw, again, a larger district, 7 members of the court, and get that district closer to, I forget the number now, it's going to be 675,000 or something, I think. I don't see a way to have enough other minority population to be able to draw a second district.
Okay.
All right. I want to wrap up. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. We actually had tons of questions asked, and I would be fine going another hour, but I know Senator Hewitt can't, and I want to be respectful of our participants as well. Senator, thank you so much. I know that this is all government affairs and redistricting all the time, so I really appreciate you taking the time to come here. I hope this was helpful and provided some feedback to you. I know you were helpful to our participants and answered some really, I think, tough questions. I want to thank all the participants for taking their time. We tried to plan this around lunch, including starting at 12:15 so people can heat up their lean cuisines or whatever and start. We will be doing this again next month. We'll have another panel. I want to ask y'all for feedback, both on the format, but particularly the topics and the type of things you'd like to hear about, potentially panelists. Please email us. We will follow up an email with y'all. I hope y'all have found this useful. This will be put on our YouTube channel, and we'll send out on social media when it gets recorded, probably do a little editing on the front end. Everyone, thank y'all so much. And I know Representative Stefanski wanted to be here as well, but I think he's probably still working. And so, we're probably going to drop off and go watch the senator on the Elections Commission. And so thank everyone for their time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.